There are a lot of things that we talk about on this channel related to different aspects or factors or layers in healing from childhood trauma. There is one in particular that is really at the core of everything when it comes to healing. And that's what I want to talk about today. Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. So this is not something new. It's something that we've certainly talked about before, but I was having a conversation with somebody and we were talking about the idea of worthiness and the challenge in being able to really ultimately trust in worthiness. So I wanted to do this video to maybe just kind of explore, maybe help you understand a little bit about what that really means when it comes to healing and why the various things that you're doing in healing are often so connected to being able to trust and believe and feel grounded in the truth of who you are. So, worthiness. I think the reality is that most of us, especially as children, but even as adults, before we really maybe became aware that there was something to heal or that there was healing to do, or allowing ourselves to really fully engage in the healing process, most of us are not necessarily sitting around thinking, I'm so unworthy. I'm so unworthy. I don't deserve that. You might be aware that you say, I don't deserve that, but the idea of unworthiness, I'm unworthy of that, therefore I don't deserve it. We're not typically consciously aware of having thoughts go through our mind, I'm unworthy, I'm unworthy, I'm unworthy. But I don't deserve it. I'm not good enough. Of course I screwed this up. Of course they don't want to hire me. Of course they don't want to be with me. I suck at that. Or any way that you might judge yourself. All of that is related, directly related to a belief, a deeply ingrained in belief in being unworthy. And how that shows up for you, as those examples that I just gave represent, can look or sound different. And depending on the circumstance, it might be a particular thing that you tend to go to, or it might be that you flow through all of those. But all of it ultimately comes down to this idea that we have held on to for so long that we are unworthy. We're unworthy of good things happening, unworthy of being loved, unworthy of having things that we not only desire, but need, that we are unworthy of care and support, that we're unworthy of connection, having a nice life, having things that we enjoy, whether it's material things or experiences. All of that comes from unworthiness. And while I'm not going to get into this today, if you're watching this, there is a very, very, very high chance, I would say, there's very little chance that you don't struggle with this, and that is shame. And shame and unworthiness are very intricately tied together. And I'm saying this right now because there are many things that factor into our sense of unworthiness. That belief was created a long time ago, but there are things in our current everyday life that reinforce that belief of being unworthy. And even when there are some bad things that are happening, it's not so much that the bad thing is reinforcing that you're unworthy, it's that the meaning that you're attaching to that bad thing happening is that you believe it's because you are unworthy. So it's reinforcing that belief. So whatever practices you're engaging in within this healing process, even something like journaling, while it has its own purpose and there might be a lot of value that you're gaining from it in specific types of circumstances or for specific reasons, even giving yourself the space to journal, to acknowledge what you feel, what you want, what you need, what you're afraid of, all of that is helpful in helping you recognize that you are worthy, that your feelings matter, that your desires matter, that your fears matter. So really, all of the practices that you might be engaging in, even without being consciously aware, are helping you believe ultimately in your worthiness. There are also things that you are doing throughout your day, quite likely, that are reinforcing your unworthiness, right? Like I mentioned about the thought that you have about the bad thing happening. If you haven't done something that you really wanted to do, and you say to yourself, you're just really lazy, and so of course you haven't achieved it. Or who do you think you are thinking you could do that? Not only does that make you feel bad, it is not conducive to inspiring you to do it, but it is reinforcing that sense of unworthiness. It also is reinforcing shame that you might be feeling about whatever you might be feeling shame around. So all the practices, all the things that you're doing in regards to healing are about believing in your worthiness. Among other things, there's other practices, right? Like you're practicing risking being vulnerable. You're practicing, well, I guess a lot of it probably has to do with vulnerability, but you're giving yourself more space before you react. You're more consciously aware of your thoughts and the feelings associated with them. All of that is part of the practice in healing. And all of those practices are helping you believe in your worthiness. And believing in your worthiness is not simply a conscious awareness and being able to say, yes, I am worthy. Now that is important. It's important for you to be able to get to a place where you can kind of objectively think about it and think, okay, if I can believe all these other people are worthy, then yeah, I guess it makes sense that I probably should be worthy as well. That is important. That's an important part of the practicing, being able to allow yourself to get there. But having that conscious thought, certainly saying it as an affirmation, staring at yourself in the mirror and saying that you're worthy, while some of those things can be helpful and some are actually important, it's only part of it, because that is within your conscious, cognitive, rational mind. Believing in your worthiness is about an experience. It's a feeling, and not even necessarily a feeling that can be defined. It's a groundedness, a trusting, a sense of safety in that trust that you are worthy. And it doesn't mean that you're sitting around thinking, I am worthy, just like you aren't sitting around thinking, I am unworthy all the time. Once you start to really trust in your worthiness, you're not thinking I'm worthy, because it's just something that you know. It's something that is real. And healing, all the things that you're doing with healing are about helping you get to that place. And I think it's important to also remember that getting to that place doesn't mean that you never question your worthiness, that you never have a moment of doubt in your worthiness. Doesn't mean that you always go after everything you want because you're so grounded in your worthiness that whether it works out or not, it doesn't matter. Doesn't mean any of that. The difference is that when you are grounded in the trust of your worthiness, when something is going on, you don't get the job that you wanted or a relationship ends, the difference is that you approach it, you experience it with those moments of questioning or doubt, but you're not consumed by that. If you think about how easily we can be consumed by doubts, by fears, right? Like something relatively small can happen, or we could even just have a thought about something, and it has a significant impact on how we feel, sometimes for days or even weeks. And it really affects how we are showing up for ourselves and in our lives. When you get to a place where you trust in that worthiness, when you are really deeply rooted into that worthiness, you're going to question something. Did I do that right? Should I have done it better? Those questions will come up on occasion. But when they do, you'll think about it in a way that won't have that emotional kind of rush of feeling, the doubt and the fear that we tend to have when we don't believe that we're worthy. Because when the thing doesn't work out and we believe that we're unworthy of it, and that reinforcement comes in, it's this heaviness, this potential anxiety or numbness, this dread, this hopelessness. I mean, there's so much that can go into that. And we can be consumed by the emotional and the physiological response that we have to that. When you are grounded in your worthiness, whatever those things are, even though it may cause you to feel a little unstable, in terms of that groundedness, even though you may think, could I have done that better? Or, oh, I think I really screwed that up. The way that it feels at that point is so completely different than how it feels when you don't believe that you're worthy and or you carry shame. Because when you approach it, like for example, oh, I really screwed that up, you're able to just be present with, okay, I screwed that up. Can I resolve it? Can I fix it? Do I need to apologize? Do I need to do something to change the outcome? And you do that from a grounded place, a place of kind of, I was going to say certainty, but that's probably not the best word. From a place of like feeling like you're capable and you have the capacity versus feeling overwhelmed and uneasy and shameful and all of those other things. And then if you do need to apologize or you do need to do something to fix it, you can do it in a way that still feels open, that still feels somewhat freeing, because you're able to do that from a more open place. And I'm sharing that because I think it's important to recognize, and I talk about this quite often, but it really is so important to recognize that healing does not mean that you're not going to struggle with things. And I think it's important, and I will continue to remind you of that, because so everybody and so often people can be doing pretty well in their healing, and then something happens and they find that they're struggling with something, in whatever way that might look. And when that happens, it causes them to question all the work that they've done, all the progress that they've made, thinking, well, if I was really healing, if I really had made all this progress, then this wouldn't be happening. Then I wouldn't be questioning myself. I wouldn't be feeling this doubt. I wouldn't be struggling again. And that is just not reality. Every human, no matter what your history is, every human will struggle. Every human will have doubt on occasion. How they handle that doubt might look different. Somebody who has done some work on themselves, has self-awareness, will handle that doubt in a more healthy, productive way. There are a lot of people that, through no fault of their own, generally just we live in cultures and societies that are not particularly conducive to mental health awareness and really understanding mental health, and the impact of different kinds of things. But for people that don't have a lot of self-awareness about it, haven't done the healing that they might need to do, when that happens, the approach will be very different, and it will make them feel even worse. When you're grounded in your worthiness, and let's say you screw something up and you apologize, it actually can feel good to do that. When you don't believe in your worthiness, you might still feel good about the fact that you apologized, but there's usually going to be a lot of other feelings that are there too, whether it's shame or doubt or unworthiness or whatever it is, that typically are going to outweigh any sort of good feeling that you might have. So thinking about all the things that you're doing along this healing journey, from that place of becoming more grounded in trusting in your worthiness. Because I think if you're probably watching this video, there is a part of you that can cognitively, rationally say, yeah, maybe I'm worthy. Maybe I am worthy of not being hurt anymore. Maybe what happened to me wasn't my fault. Recognizing that all of the work that you're doing is taking that, or creating that, if you're not there yet, taking that and internalizing it in a way that it becomes your default. And I've talked about that concept before, that before healing and even in the process of healing, our default is to immediately go back to old core beliefs, old patterns of coping, that sort of thing, right? That is the default. It's an automatic thing. The more consciously aware you are of various things, but in particular, building your sense of worthiness, the more you can internalize that becomes your default. And when I'm talking about like being really deeply rooted or grounded in your sense of worthiness, being worthy is the default. Being vulnerable can still feel vulnerable. Otherwise, it wouldn't be vulnerable. But when you approach it from that place of groundedness, while it can feel vulnerable, it doesn't feel as bad as vulnerability does when you don't believe in your worthiness. But you also are trusting that whatever that vulnerability is around, that it will be okay, that you will be okay, that let's say that vulnerability is going after a job that you want and you don't get it. When you don't believe that you're worthy, that can be incredibly devastating. Like really, really devastating, and can lead to some really bad things. When you are grounded in your worthiness, you can be disappointed. You can feel the disappointment in that. You might feel a sense of rejection. You might question your career choice. Like, those things might come up, but they're typically going to be relatively short-lived, particularly when you compare it to how it might have been before. And instead of causing you to pull back and give up, you might take from that, like, okay, are there any things that I can improve on? Maybe my interviewing skills or updating my resume. Are there things that I could do to help me move out of this feeling and do something else that would be beneficial to me, like maybe connecting with a friend or something like that? Where when you don't believe in your worthiness, again, things can be pretty bad and you're more likely to isolate. So when you think about all the things that you're doing for healing, as small as it may seem or as big as it may be, everything that you're doing is ultimately about you being able to trust in your worthiness, trusting in the truth that has always been the truth of who you are. And that is worthy. That is deserving. It is good enough. More than good enough. That has always been true, no matter what you have believed, no matter what life has thrown at you to try to tell you otherwise. You are, and you always have been, worthy. And you are absolutely worthy of healing. And you have what you need already within you. It's just a matter of not giving up and continuing to do the practices that are important and necessary for healing. So when you maybe think about an affirmation or you're trying to remind yourself that you're worthy, let yourself feel the truth of that. And if you're early on in this process, your mind is immediately going to go to all the reasons that you believe you're not, all the reasons that you believe that you're not worthy. And that's one of the reasons why affirmations are really kind of tricky in a sense. But let yourself open to the possibility. At first, that's all it needs to be, a possibility that you are worthy. And eventually, it becomes the reality that you are worthy. And just because you're in the possibility stage doesn't mean that you're not yet worthy. It's just that you're not yet able to trust in that worthiness. And that's what you deserve. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. I'd love to hear what came up for you. Share in the comments. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.